1,000 years ago, a bloody struggle for control of the world's most sacred site led to 200 years of holy war. A conflict that would see the rise of a legendary military order, sworn to protect the faithful. Some called them heroes, and yet, in their time, they would be accused of corruption and blasphemy.
Homosexual relationships, they were also accused of spitting on the cross.
It was said they were heretics who worshipped a mysterious idol in the form of a bearded head. An idol that new evidence now suggests could be the most sacred of all Christian relics.
The head was described in various different ways. The general appearance of it was of a disembodied male head with a short forked beard and long hair.
For centuries, they would be known as a sinister cult, whose sacred sites were shrouded in mystic symbolism and arcane ritual. Were the Knights Templar really the enemies of Christianity, or the victims of cynical propaganda?
There has to be an explanation. There has to be a story. So it has to be the Templars rose because they were virtuous and then they fell because they were sinners.
Jerusalem, a city venerated by three of the world's greatest religions: Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. A city whose ancient walls contain the most bitterly contested sacred sites on earth. On one of the three great hills of the Old City stands the Temple Mount. According to Jewish belief, this was the ancient site of Solomon's temple and the resting place of a powerful sacred object, the Ark of the Covenant. Once the most venerated shrine of the Jewish world, the temple was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. But the site remains a place of great mystery. 900 years ago, it became the headquarters of a new order of warrior monks, the Knights Templar. It was from this base that they transformed themselves into the wealthiest and most powerful military religious order in history.
We could compare the Templar Knights a little bit like today what we would see the SEALs or the Special Forces.
Certainly Templars were considered to be perhaps the single most elite fighting force in Europe in the 12th and the 13th centuries.
The Templars had their origins in the bitter struggle for another of Jerusalem's holy places. A short distance east of the Temple Mount lies the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The church was founded in the 4th century AD, at the very place where many Christians believe Jesus of Nazareth was crucified. But this immense domed rotunda overshadows a sacred site of even greater significance: the Holy Sepulchre itself, the tomb from which Jesus is said to have risen 3 days after his death.
The Church of the Holy Sepulchre itself has immense significance for all Christians. Jerusalem was believed in the Christian worldview to be the center of the world. It was depicted as such on maps. It was the center of the Christian faith. It was sanctified by Christ's presence, his life, his crucifixion, and his resurrection.
For more than 1,600 years, Christian pilgrims have come to worship at this shrine. In 637 AD, however, they did so at the risk of persecution and death. In that year, Muslim armies conquered Jerusalem, first burning the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and then converting it into a mosque. Centuries later, the armies of the Christian world set out to win it back. In 1095, Pope Urban II gave his blessing to a holy war known as the First Crusade. For 3 years, 70,000 Christian knights and warriors waged a bloody campaign in the Middle East. In 1099, the Crusaders recaptured Jerusalem, slaughtering its Muslim and Jewish population. Once again, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Christianity's most sacred site, was in Christian hands. As pilgrims from Europe began flocking to the Holy Land, the Crusaders established 4 large settlements to protect the pilgrimage route: Odessa, Antioch, Tripoli, and Jerusalem. They built dozens of castles to govern the conquered territory. Soon, Jerusalem would be home to the most powerful and controversial military religious order the world has ever known. Despite the presence of the Crusader armies, attacks on pilgrims increased. The Crusaders feared that if they did not take action, all the gains they had made would be for nothing.
The security situation of the new kingdom, however, was difficult. Pilgrims travelling out to Jerusalem were attacked on the road by bandits. Some warriors who came out to Jerusalem on pilgrimage decided that what the kingdom really needed was not just prayer, but force.
In 1119, 9 Crusader knights, led by the French nobleman Hugh de Payens, vowed to devote themselves to the protection of pilgrims.
The Templars come into existence in the wake or the aftermath of the Crusades. There is a perceived problem about the protection of pilgrims, who are, of course, coming in greater numbers to Jerusalem in the wake of the success of the First Crusade, and the Templars are organized effectively to provide that escort.
They set up their headquarters here at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on Temple Mount. For over 60 years, this would be the Knights' center of power, their military and religious headquarters. Many believe this to be the original site of Solomon's Temple. For centuries, Christian scholars had speculated about its mystical purpose. The Knights were fascinated by this place, so much so that they called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, a title eventually shortened to Knights Templar. In the holiest precinct of the world's holiest city, the Templars controlled a legacy dating back to the time of King Solomon. Thousands of years of spiritual and arcane knowledge from the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. A vast spiritual treasure house to which the Templars now held the key. 10 years after they were founded, the Templars were endorsed at the Council of Troyes by the Pope himself. They were given special status under papal rule and the freedom to move through Europe without restriction. Bernard of Clairvaux, one of the leading churchmen of the day, drew up the Latin rule, which outlined how the ideal Templar knight should behave. Swearing oaths of poverty, chastity, and obedience, Templars were not permitted to gamble, swear, or become drunk. The ceremonies and rituals of the order were shrouded in secrecy. Quickly, it began to grow in size and power. In 1139, the Pope granted the Templars further special privileges, exempting them from paying taxes to kings and lords. Henceforth, the order would be subject to the Pope and the Pope alone.
It took about 50 or 70 years for them to evolve into perhaps the single wealthiest military and religious order in Europe. They had very strong moral support of leading church figures of their own day. But of course, it wasn't enough. You also needed financial support. And that's where they could always rely on the support of local nobility.
The Templars were a breed apart. Supported by the kings of Europe and blessed by the Church, they had access to the most sacred city on earth and all the secrets it contained. But in time, accusations would emerge that this seemingly pure Christian order was anything but. There were accounts of perverse practices and dark blasphemous rituals. Some believed that the Templars did not worship Jesus at all. Instead, it was rumored that they were heretics who venerated a mysterious and powerful entity. In the early 12th century, 9 Crusader knights founded a sacred order in Jerusalem. Originally dedicated to the protection of Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land, the Knights Templars soon became the most powerful military religious order of the Middle Ages.
Unlike other armies in the 12th century, the Templars were a permanent, disciplined force that trained and fought together on the battlefield. They were first in the field, they were last off the field.
At the order's peak, there were between 15,000 and 20,000 Templars. Among them, 2,000 knights, whose distinctive trademark was a white robe bearing a red cross worn over their armor. They were in the vanguard of the war between the Crusaders and the Muslim armies that had by now declared jihad on the Christian invaders. The Templars were the shock troops of the crusade, forbidden from retreating in battle unless outnumbered 3 to 1.
They were greatly admired not only in the West by Christians, but also by their enemies, the Muslims. The famous Sultan Saladin executed all the Templars that he captured because they were the people who would never surrender.
The Templars' role was to burst through enemy lines ahead of the main army. And to do this, they employed a fearsome maneuver called the squadron charge.
It was to take advantage of the height, the speed, and the devastating power of this close formation of heavily armored knights to completely scatter an enemy formation so that the foot soldiers following up behind could engage an enemy that was already depleted and confused.
At the Battle of Montgisard in 1177, 400 knights and a few thousand infantry managed to defeat an army of more than 26,000 soldiers. The Templars played a critical role in this victory. Their ferocious fighting skills and tactical expertise temporarily stopped Jerusalem from falling into the hands of the great Muslim warlord, Saladin. As the Templars grew in power and importance, they took possession of other sites across the Holy Land. Northwest of Jerusalem, on the shores of the Mediterranean, lay the city of Acre, a strategic port of vital importance at the time of the Crusades. This imposing citadel is built on the site of a former Crusader fortress. Little remains of Acre's Templar fortress, but in 1994, workmen discovered a hidden tunnel that linked the fortress with the city's port 1,150 feet to the west. The construction showcases Templar engineering at its best. This strategic subterranean passageway may have been intended as an escape route, and perhaps the Templars used it to secretly bring certain items out of the Holy Land. Because the war between Christianity and Islam did not begin and end here. It was also fought in Europe. Templar operations extended far beyond the Crusader states. The order acquired huge tracts of land across the continent, founding local branches known as commanderies. They also established sacred sites, churches where they could hold secret ceremonies. One of these sites was founded in the New Kingdom of Portugal, where Christians were at war with invading Muslims from North Africa. As ever, the Templars were at the forefront of the battle. In the city of Tomar, east of Lisbon, they built a great hilltop citadel, the Convento de Cristo. The knights made full use of the military expertise they had acquired in the Holy Land, constructing a central keep ringed by a deep circuit wall and round towers resistant to the most concerted siege.
The round towers permitted a defensive on 360 degrees. It was an innovation at that time, a military innovation that only in Middle East would be seen in other castles.
At the heart of the complex, they built a magnificent round church known as the Corolla. With Muslim forces massing outside the city gates, this church would have served as a reminder of why they were fighting. The construction was overseen by a Portuguese Templar called Galdim Pais. Having spent 5 years in the Holy Land, Pais was steeped in all the mysticism and esoteric knowledge of the Templars. Now he had returned to build a little Jerusalem in his homeland.
He is the most important Knight Templar in Portuguese history and one of the most important perhaps in the whole Templar history. It is believed that in the Holy Land he acquired a great amount of knowledge. Some say some occult knowledge.
The influence of Eastern mysticism is evident at the Convento de Cristo. The circular corolla was modeled on the rotunda of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. But there is something even more intriguing about this church. The rotunda is an octagon. It has 8 sides, and this in itself has sacred meaning, because the number 8 reappears again and again in the Templar sites of Tomar. A short distance east of the Convento de Cristo stands the Church of Santa Maria do Olival. This is the final resting place of Portugal's Templars. At one time, this church would have displayed many Templar devices and symbols. When it was renovated in the 16th century, most of these symbols were eradicated, but some can still be seen. This church abounds with sacred numerology. 8 steps descend from the front entrance. 8 columns separate the central nave from the outer aisles.
The 8 here, it's a very big discussion, but it in fact represents the number of eternal life.
The number 8 was central to the order's rituals. The oath taken by initiates contained 8 articles, and a Templar found guilty of venal sin would suffer 8 days of penance. And in a window high above the nave, there is another potent symbol. The pentagram is associated with the Seal of Solomon, a mythical ring with magical powers which God bestowed on the ancient biblical king. Here, 2,500 miles west of the Holy Land, the Templars were maintaining a vital link with Solomon's temple. Perhaps the secret of their success lay in the mystical knowledge they had discovered there, an understanding of sacred mathematics, or something even more mysterious. Whatever the reason, the Templars were becoming powerful and wealthy beyond wildest imagining, not just at Tomar, but all over Western Europe. Here at Cressing Temple in England, the remains of one of their estates still survives. These massive timber barns are a testament to the sheer scale of Templar wealth.
By the middle of the 13th century, there is no question that the Templars became the single wealthiest landlord compared to other religious and military orders in Europe. In England alone, they possess something over 65,000 acres. Cressing Temple was one of the first landed estates granted to the Templars. At that point, there were something like 700 acres of arable land. It also had very extensive sheep pasture, enough to sustain over 1,000 sheep.
The Templars divided the estate into lots, for which their tenants paid a rental income every year, providing a major source of revenue for the order. The Pope had granted the order unique freedom from taxes and state control. This allowed the Templars to establish a financial monopoly. Though sworn to poverty, they managed the assets of Crusader noblemen and pilgrims.
And we can really say that the Templars were indeed perhaps the first multinational or international financial corporation.
After 200 years as the religious and military masters of the Holy Land, the Templars had gathered a great treasure house of arcane knowledge and ancient relics. They had also amassed extraordinary riches. But in doing so, they were sowing the seeds of their downfall. Sooner or later, their wealth was bound to cause envy among those in power. And some believed that the most famous monastic order of the Middle Ages owed its success to a dark and enigmatic force. It was said that behind closed doors, they engaged in perverse initiations and blasphemous rituals, that these seemingly heroic Christian knights were secretly anti-Christian heretics. 200 years after their formation in Jerusalem during the Crusades, the Knights Templar had become richer and more powerful than many kings and princes. With a network of bases across Europe, they controlled vast estates, collected rents, and financed wars as the world's first international bank. But all of this would come to an end suddenly and dramatically. The Templars would be arrested, many knights and brothers interrogated, and the entire order crushed. At the Tower of London and other sites across Europe, they confessed to hugely controversial practices. But it is what they revealed about their secret initiation rites that shocked most of all. Temple Church in central London is one of Europe's most famous Templar sites. Built in 1185, it is all that remains of the order's vast financial headquarters in England's capital, a huge walled complex called the New Temple. Once again, the Templars were signposting their links with Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. The church contains striking stone effigies discovered beneath the church floor in the 19th century. These carved statues once lay on the tombs of knights. These imposing figures may have inspired the young men who wished to join the ranks of the Templars, because it was here that the English knights conducted their initiation rituals.
The initiations were part of that preparation to go to the Holy Land or even to be accepted in the order.
New brothers made vows to God and the Virgin Mary, and also took vows of chastity, obedience, and poverty. 3 Templar principles that are displayed vividly on the church's magnificent stained glass window. The vigilant knight on the left represents obedience. The veiled woman at the center is chastity, and the humble monk to the right is poverty. Outsiders were not banned, but merely discouraged from attending. There were, however, rooms at Temple Church where other initiation rituals took place, and these ceremonies were conducted in total secrecy.
The initiation ritual for the Templar Knights would be a very rough task, something not very easy.
During the Templar trials, members of the order described how initiates were required to perform bizarre sexual rites, bestowing obscene kisses on the bodies of senior members. They confessed to spitting and trampling on the cross and denying the divinity of Jesus.
The accusations have been leveled at the Templars are extremely lurid, and have always attracted, for that reason, a great deal of attention. But they are there in black and white in the trial depositions, so we have to address them and assess them.
But most shocking of all was the testimony that the Templars worshipped a sinister bearded head.
In the trials, the head was described in various different ways. Sometimes they said it had 2 heads. Sometimes brothers described it as having 4 feet. Some said it was made of silver. Some said it was made of gold.
It was rumored to be the preserved head of the first Templar Grand Master, Hugh de Payens. It was also described as a 2-faced skull or the head of an animal. Some mentioned a weird idol known as Baphomet. It's possible the word Baphomet was a corrupted pronunciation of Mohammed. If so, some have suggested this is evidence that the Templars were secret converts to Islam.
In the 12th century, when the Knights Templar went to the Holy Land, they were confronted with a culture that was very superior to their own. So some influences began to settle in the general ideology of the Templars.
But none of these theories is totally convincing. The answer may lie concealed in a small church in rural England. The Church of St. Mary at Templecombe looks like a typical English country chapel, but it is home to an extraordinary artifact. One of the church's walls is adorned with a strange wooden panel. Painted on the boards is the image of a mysterious bearded head. The panel was discovered over 70 years ago by an elderly woman named Molly Drew. Entering her shed one day to collect firewood, she was surprised to see fragments of plaster on the floor.
Looking up at the ceiling, she found a face looking down at her. In her opinion, it was the face of Christ. And it was painted, she described it as being in very, very vivid colours, blues and greens, with golden stars all around it.
The ancient painting, in fact, bears a striking resemblance to one of the most famous images of Jesus in history, the Shroud of Turin. The shroud is an ancient linen cloth, allegedly bearing the imprint of the body of a crucified man. Many scientists hold that it is a medieval hoax, but some believe that it is the actual burial cloth of Jesus. And some believe that this wood panel is evidence that the Templars once possessed the shroud. The shroud was said to have disappeared from Constantinople when it was sacked by the Templars in 1204. Carbon dating reveals that the board dates from 1280, a time when Templecombe was a thriving Templar community. A photograph taken soon after it was found shows that the panel originally had hinges attached. It seems that it was once the lid of a box.
Their opinion then was that this could possibly have been the lid of a box that had once contained the Turin shroud.
Further evidence emerged to link this painting to the Turin shroud. Analysis of dust particles from the rear of the panel revealed traces of cotton, flax, amber, and myrrh, substances often used in the course of ancient burial rites, substances said to have been found on the Shroud of Turin. There is another piece of evidence that suggests the Knights Templar once possessed this remarkable item.
Another important clue is that in the proceedings of the trials against the Templars, one of them, a Templar, said he was ordered to worship and kiss a long linen cloth with the shape of a man on it. And clearly, this object recalls the Shroud of Turin.
There is no doubt that the Templars would have treasured the shroud as a sacred relic. And yet, even if the Templars possessed it, the shroud does not match the description of the bearded head they worshipped. Most of the trial reports say that the head was a three-dimensional object, an actual preserved head, or possibly a human skull. Whose head was it? The Templars may have left us a clue. In the main square of Tomar, Portugal, facing a statue of the Templar Grand Master Galdim Paish, there stands a curious church, the Church of St. John the Baptist. This place offers a lead on the mysterious icon the Templars supposedly worshipped. Not an image of the devil or Muhammad or even Jesus' face on the Shroud of Turin. A legendary relic that some say the Templars possessed. The remains of a martyr whose grisly fate is depicted here within the church. It could be that the solution to this Templar mystery is found in the severed head of John the Baptist. After 2 centuries as the wealthiest and most powerful military order of the Middle Ages, the Knights Templars' fall from grace was as spectacular as it was sudden. In the early 14th century, Templars all over Europe were rounded up and imprisoned. At places like the Church of All Hallows in London, inquisitors subjected them to severe interrogation. In the trials that followed, the order was accused of heresy. The most damning charge was that of idol worship. It was said that they revered a mysterious bearded head, venerating and even kissing this strange disembodied object during their secret initiation rituals. Whether it was a pagan icon, an image of Jesus, or the head of the order's first Grand Master, no definite evidence of this grisly artifact was ever found. But one intriguing possibility remains. In the medieval world, sacred relics were highly prized by churches and religious orders. These were objects attributed to saints, from personal belongings to actual body parts. And they were believed to work miracles. Here in the center of Jerusalem, there is another church of St. John the Baptist. This place holds a relic of the saint, and it lies right next to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where the Templars were founded in 1119.
Medieval relics were considered so important because people had a huge belief in the afterlife and Christianity and God in those days, and that they believed that the relics would somehow imbue them with something of that saint or that person.
In 1204, a rampaging Crusader army sacked Constantinople, looting many of the ancient city's precious relics. One of these stolen relics made its way to northern France. Such was its importance that a magnificent sacred site was built to house it, the great Cathedral of Amiens. This place is a masterpiece of Gothic engineering, famed for its majestic towers and elegant flying buttresses. The front facade is adorned with 22 massive statues of the kings of France. But the real attraction lies within the cathedral itself. This is a place of breathtaking grandeur. Covering over 75,000 square feet, it is the largest medieval church interior in Europe. The treasure that gave rise to its existence must have been precious indeed. Here at the northern end of the church is an ornate reliquary, a hemisphere of transparent crystal. This contains an upper facial bone that many believe to be part of John the Baptist's skull. Some scholars believe that this relic is nothing less than the head the Templars venerated. The order is known to have been in Constantinople soon after the city was sacked. It could be that they acquired the relic and brought it to Amiens.
I think it's highly likely that the Templars could have possessed the head of John the Baptist. Certainly when the relics disappeared from Constantinople, I think it's very likely that they fell into the hands of the Templars, who were renowned to be collectors of very important relics.
The figure of John the Baptist features prominently in the code of the Templars. The saint's feast day, June 24th, was a special time of prayerful observance for the knights. They were not permitted to fight or transact business on this day. But how authentic is the Amiens relic? Centuries later, is it possible to know if it really is the skull of John the Baptist? And if so, was this the relic the Templars worshipped? Recent scientific research has brought us closer to the truth. In 2010, a collection of ancient bones was discovered in a small marble sarcophagus some 200 miles north of Constantinople. An inscription on the sarcophagus linked the bones to John the Baptist. Archaeologist Tom Hyam of the Oxford Radiocarbon Unit has carried out a series of scientific tests on the bones.
We were able to isolate mitochondrial DNA, first of all, from the bones to figure out their relationship to one another. And very interestingly, what we found was that there's an extremely high probability that all of the bones come from the same person.
The tests also revealed that the bones came from a Middle Eastern man who lived at the time of Jesus. This supports the theory that these were the bones of John the Baptist. It is thought they originally came from Constantinople. Everything suggests that they belong to the same hoard of relics that contain the Baptist's skull. Relics, it seems, that the Knights Templar were deeply interested in.
So what we think might have happened is that relics associated with John the Baptist may have found their way to Constantinople in the 4th century. Well, I know that the Knights had a head that they worshipped that has been associated with John the Baptist. And very interestingly also, at about the same time, we have evidence for the movement of relics of John the Baptist following the sack of Constantinople into Western Europe. It's quite apparent to us that about the time of the Knights Templar, there were a lot of bones associated with John the Baptist moving around the Christian world. There was a big cult of John the Baptist during this period, and it was clearly associated with the Knights Templar.
The truth remains elusive, but evidence suggests that the Templars may well have possessed the Baptist's head. If this was the idol they revered, then a fascinating possibility emerges. Some scholars have suggested that the Templars may have been Johannites, members of a shadowy sect who denounced Jesus and worshipped John the Baptist as the true Messiah. Perhaps this was the heretical belief they had adopted at the site of Solomon's temple. This would explain the testimony that they spat on the cross and denied Jesus. This may seem like a myth, another Templar conspiracy theory, but it was taken seriously at the very highest levels of the Catholic Church. Pope Pius IX accepted it as fact. In 1865, he explicitly linked the order with Johannism, the worship of John the Baptist.
There existed at that period in the East a sect of Johannite Christians who claimed to be the only true initiates into the real mysteries of the religion of the Savior. The Templars, like all other secret orders and associations, had two doctrines, one concealed and reserved for the masters, which was Johannism, the other public, which was Roman Catholic. Thus they deceived the adversaries whom they sought to supplant.
The accusation has never been proven. But if it is true, then the Templars professed a secret heresy, even as they became one of the most powerful forces in Europe. But their very status and the wealth they had amassed would cause their downfall. In 1187, the Muslim warlord Saladin recaptured Jerusalem. The Templars had lost possession of one of the most sacred sites in Christendom. Though several attempts were made to recapture the city, it would remain under Muslim control.
The Church of the Holy Sepulchre was the focus of Christian pilgrimage in the Holy Land. So losing the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to Saladin in 1187 was a disaster for the Templars.
A century later, the last Crusader stronghold, the city of Acre, fell to the Muslims. The Templars' role as defenders of the Holy Land had come to an end. This left them dangerously vulnerable to European enemies who envied their wealth. Less than 2 decades after the fall of the Holy Land, the King of France struck the Templars a fatal blow. At dawn, on October 13, 1307, he set in motion a chain of events that would discredit the order and damn their memory for centuries to come. King Philip IV commanded every member of the Templar order to be imprisoned on charges of heresy. In 2002, a remarkable discovery in the Vatican secret archives undercut all the conspiracy theories. This document may at last reveal the truth about the Templars and their disastrous fall from grace. After 2 centuries of power, influence, and wealth, the fall of the Templar Order was the greatest scandal of the Middle Ages. When the end came, it was swift and brutal. In 1307, King Philip IV commanded every member of the Templar Order to be imprisoned on charges of heresy. Their lands and possessions were confiscated, and members of the order were arrested and interrogated. In confinement, the knights were subjected to gruesome tortures. It was then, and only then, that they confessed to acts of blasphemy, heresy, and homosexuality. The French king's propaganda ensured that many believed these confessions to be true.
So it seems the charges picked on particular characteristics of the Templars and then blew them up or turned them over or changed them inside out. And it's also a matter of the big lie. The lie is so big it must have something in it, because nobody would say that if there wasn't some truth. This is something that you could accuse them of. They're much too pious. They must be idolaters.
Philip's pursuit of the Templars was relentless. Knights who confessed were imprisoned or made to do penance. Those who refused or resisted were executed. In 1310, 54 members of the order were burned at the stake outside Paris before they could even mount a proper defense. The Pope himself, Clement V, had always been the Templars' most ardent ally, but now facing allegations that one of the Church's most respected institutions was rotten to the core, he had no option but to abolish the order. Finally, in 1314, Jacques de Molay, the last Templar Grand Master, was burned on a scaffold on the River Seine. Fallen from the height of power to utter disgrace, the Templar Order was no more, and yet no solid proof of their alleged crimes had ever emerged. But new evidence has been uncovered that may lay the conspiracy theories to rest once and for all. In 2001, paleographer Barbara Frale discovered a medieval document at the Vatican's secret archives. Known as the Chinon parchment, the document dates from the time of the Templar trials. It reveals what Pope Clement really thought of the charges against the order.
La pergamena di Chinon è un documento molto importante.
The Chinon document is really important for the history of the Templars because it clearly shows that Pope Clement V absolved them. This allowed the Templars to receive Holy Communion. This is important as it shows the Pope did not see them as heretics, because heretics would not be allowed Holy Communion.
Non sarebbe mai stato concesso di ricevere I sacramenti.
The Chinon parchment was written in 1308, during the height of the proceedings against the Templars. It shows that Pope Clement did not believe the Templars were guilty of heresy. In effect, he was stating that the accusations that they denied Jesus, spat on the cross, and worshipped a head were unfounded. 700 years on from the Templar trials, the parchment completely undermines the very charges that sealed the order's fate. The Templars may have possessed a relic of John the Baptist, but as far as Pope Clement was concerned, they did not bow down before it. Their true allegiance was to Jesus. But if the Templars were not heretics, why was the French king so determined to destroy them? When all the legends and conspiracy theories are stripped away, it may come down to the basest motivating factor of all: money. Deeply indebted to the Templars for loans taken out in his war with England, King Philip IV was effectively wiping his own slate clean.
It can't be denied that Philip IV of France wanted money. His father had bankrupted the country, fighting the Kingdom of Aragon in what's now Spain. He debased the currency. There had been riots in Paris. He'd arrested the Jews and taken their money. He arrested the Italian bankers and took their money. So when he arrested the Templars and took their money, it's not surprising people said he wants their money.
In the final analysis, there could be another explanation for the bizarre practices the Templars were accused of. Just as modern armies use waterboarding and other techniques to prepare soldiers for what they could face as captives of war, it's possible that the Templars adopted a similar approach. Their supposedly blasphemous rituals may actually have been designed to toughen initiates, helping them resist the tortures they might conceivably face at the hands of their Muslim enemies. What they could never have known was that their greatest enemy would emerge from within Christendom itself. The fall of the Knights Templar had nothing to do with the occult and everything to do with power and politics. To this day, their sacred sites remain among the foremost legacies of medieval Christianity. They are the incredible temples of the greatest and most controversial religious order of the Middle Ages. An order that, in the end, was simply too powerful to survive.